Hey everyone, I hope you're having a fantastic day so far. Today, I'm going to be talking about the dark side of contracting. It's not all roses and, petals and stuff. There are sides that can be challenging. So let's get into it. So effectively, I'm going to be talking about some of the challenges I've faced. This is not stuff that people always face all the time. And the way I see it is, it's good to know what the challenges look like, because if you are aware of what is to come or may come, then you are more equipped to deal with some of these different situations. Now, this is not aimed to deter you necessarily, but this is just aimed to give you some ammo so you know how to navigate. I've got this picture here because, some of you may have seen this video of my journey. And if you haven't checked it out, then make sure you check it out. It'll probably pop up somewhere, pretending like I know where it is. But anyway, we'll get straight into it. So essentially, these are the things that I'm going to be talking about. So number one, I'm going to be talking about the reality of long breaks, how that has affected me, what that looks like, X, Y, and Z. Number two, I'm going to be talking about permies versus contractors. So that's just shorthand for permanent employment staff. I'm also going to talk about leadership, okay, because that's a thing that you definitely need to bear in mind. Then I'll move on to system failures. So how sometimes policies and processes don't necessarily work in your favor, and it can be difficult to really overcome some of these challenges. The next thing I'll talk about is the interview process and how you just need to be on it, okay? And lastly, I'm going to be talking about money because, fam, this ain't no charity. So let's get into it. So we're talking about long breaks. What do I mean by this? Well, essentially, for me personally, I've been in a situation where I had a long break starting from, I think it was mid-September, okay? So I decided to hand in my notice and didn't really align with the values anymore, and said, yeah, I just want to do this. Now, this wasn't random, but it kind of aligned with the fact that, number one, mentally I thought doesn't really work out, but two, I wanted to explore some other sides of my business and push that a bit more. And so I calculated that roughly 4 to 5 months of not working a contract would be enough for me to do what I'm doing. So I gave myself a time limit. Now, this only worked because I was able to have, some cash monies in my account, and me and my partner, we have an emergency fund. So that worked out really well. Now, it sounds like a great opportunity because I know I wouldn't have been able to have done that in my previous role. But why am I saying this? Well, really, I guess I'm saying this because this is not a usual thing, number one. But two, sometimes you get into this mindset of, oh wow, like, should I really be doing this? Like, this doesn't feel right, because obviously you've been accustomed to this whole permanent lifestyle and everything else, and it may feel a bit foreign. But the beauty is that you can do this, and I want to highlight this. But the challenge here, the dark side, is managing that sort of like mindset. I don't know if you guys are aware of Dr. Stephen Peters' work. So he wrote the book Chimp Paradox. There should be a link in the description below. He's got a new one called Path to the Jungle, and he really explains how we manage this whole chimp and human mindset. And I was really at times managing this chimp mindset, but really and truly, I'm not gonna lie, like, thinking about the grand scheme of things and all of that kind of jazz there, I dealt with it okay. I mean, the hustle was hustling, but not hustling as much as the contract. Do you know what I mean? So we had to think of a strategy. And so, during these days and everything else, what did I end up doing? Well, I started to talk to people, okay? What kept me sane is speaking to other contractors, speaking to other people who were in a similar position. Whether they made the decision or whether they were let go early or whether they decided to leave, it didn't really matter. I had people I could speak to, and some of them are kind of still in that journey now, but not because the market conditions are unfavorable, because of choice. And so having people you can speak to is really, really important. In addition, you have to remember, like, I wanted this break. So this was an experiment that I was going through, but I had to get the go ahead from the partner. Can't just be saying, oh, I'm not working anymore. So who's going to pay for X, Y, and Z? Obviously we do it together, but a combined income, you have plans and all this kind of stuff there. So she was super supportive, really helpful. Although it's not her natural standpoint to be in that risky situation, quote unquote, she was very supportive. I also had support from immediate family and all of that kind of stuff there. So really sort of like thankful in that way. They trusted me to, not mess this up, so to speak. In addition to that, I think it's also important to make sure that you continue to speak to recruiters and you continue to, again, keep your leads warm. So what I realized was that essentially you get to speak to all these people. I spoke to people every week, if not, I would say 3 times a week, there was a new recruiter at least speaking to me between the time of September to about December times or whatever it may be. And, it seems promising, but the reality is, like, you can't guarantee that you're necessarily going to get anything. They're just nice conversations to have, and they have you on the database. Now they're all sort of like messaging me, but sorry, mate, I'm in contract. And, that's not a bad thing. It just means they may have you in mind for a specific type of thing. The other thing that I did was I kept my CV fresh. I really looked at my CV and I thought to myself, how can I improve this? How can I make this better? How can I make this bolder? How can I make this stand out? And so what I'm saying is, as much as there is a dark side of dealing with things mentally, at the same time, there is a benefit to it, and it comes down to a mindset. It really comes down to a mindset. So that's that. So real things to sort of like remember here is, number one, stack an emergency fund. Really important thing for you to do, because if you don't have those spare monies, whether it's in your personal account or in your combined account with your partner, it's going to be difficult. Number two is you need to plan your break if you can. Now, I want to be fair here, because you can't always plan your break. If it's health versus money, I'm going to choose health. I just am. That's just my value system, okay? So, but if you can sort of plan it, even if you're moving towards a potential mental health sort of breakdown, then yeah, that's the best opportunity you can have in terms of making sure that you're stable when you do sort of like leave a contract. The next thing is to gain support from loved ones if you can. And if this doesn't apply to you, so to speak, then I guess you need to gain support from yourself. It's having that sort of like mentality where you can emotionally but also rationally make a decision when it comes to this sort of long break, okay? And sometimes you can't help it, Sometimes it's the market. It's not always you decide. Sometimes they let go of you. Maybe you're not good enough. Maybe they've run out of budget. Maybe there's something else that's come through. I mean, this hasn't happened to me, but it can happen, and it does happen. So this is something to recognize. The other thing is occupy yourself with productive, sort of like meaningful things, like when you're on this break, and also take time to have some rest, because look, when you start getting back into that 9 to 5, unless you're going into sort of like a really sort of like good culture, it's going to be difficult. The last thing is to say that you need to stay active when it comes to the whole recruiting landscape and improving your CV and your supporting statements and all those different lovely things that we love to do, apparently. Okay, so yeah, bear these things in mind when it comes to long breaks. The next thing is thinking about permanent members of staff versus contractors. Now, look, for me personally, there isn't a problem per se. However, there are sort of like some people who feel like there is a bit of a divide, okay? And with this divide comes its own challenges. So I remember in my first contract when, I was working for X company or whatever it may be, I had some permanent members of staff, indirectly, not directly, I heard this through other means, basically just judge me, I mean, it may be for the fact that, obviously we're on a different day rate, or it may be for the fact that we don't embed into the space the same way. I don't know what it is. I'm not even going to try and sort of like decide or think about or make up what I think it is, because frankly, I don't really care. That's on them. It's not on me. I know I've come in with a good heart, and I know I've come in with the right mentality. But unfortunately, some people feel this way. Now, what you may possibly hear is the fact that, these people are making way more money than us, or they are sort of like, they're too big for the boots, or they're not even that good, or whatever it may be. You could get us to do it. I can understand all of those challenges. And in some way, I was that person as well. But when you're in the seat of a contractor or an independent consultant, depending on how you want to sort of label it, you have to understand there are more challenges that you need to face being in that position. And it's a life of risk, whether you chose it or not. It's a life of risk. It's a risk that I like to take, and the fact that some people are watching this means that they're looking to entertain as well. The world is moving that way, but not everyone's going to agree with that, and I respect that. Okay, I want people to understand that I respect that. I don't feel like this is more superior than anything else. But I think what was frustrating at the time was that, these people either didn't know or forgot that I had 12 solid years of service within the NHS, the National Health Service. So it was a bit frustrating, to say the least. But the reality is, in my experience, this is a small minority. This is not a big majority. And even if it was a big majority, whatever. I mean, if this is the life that you're going to be choosing, then you need to do it with your chest. You can't be half-hearting it, sort of thing. And that's the issue that some people face. They half-heart this whole sort of career path, this portfolio career, when really you need to go all in, okay? Because there's an entrepreneurial spirit to this whole thing. Now, it's important to understand that there are some people who've come into this industry based on what I believe are three bigger main reasons. Number one, they became one due to redundancy, okay? They didn't even want to be a contractor, but because they became redundant, it became a thing that they've sort of taken on. And this may be good for them, or they may hate the fact that they don't feel, safe or comfortable. The other thing is they don't like the stress of the upkeep, okay? Whether it comes to the sort of finance standpoint of things, or finding a new contract, or just all of that kind of stuff. They don't want to deal with it. And the third thing is they're used to the cushion of the idea of permanency. And this is an idea because no one's truly safe. But I guess, with permanent sort of positions, they give you this sense of guarantee, So yeah, I can understand all these things, and I hold no judgment because their points make logical sense. But the reality is contracting is not necessarily a logical path, okay? But once you sort of shift your perspective and you understand what is actually being done here, then you're like, damn, why not? I mean, I've spoken about the pros and the cons of contracting before, so you can check out previous videos for that. But this is the decision that you need to make for yourself. So, accompanying this stuff, it's, I guess it's about making sure that, if you are moving into the space, you have to let your value speak for itself. You have to. What do I mean by this? Well, basically what I mean is there are ways in which you produce value, and that value will enable people to speak highly of you. That's how you develop your personal brand. That's how you get more work. That's how you are recommended or accredited or given whatever it may be, because of the value you produce. And so the way you do this is a number of different ways, okay? So number one, you have to be constantly communicating and employing good emotional intelligence skills. You have to. So that is having good self-awareness, having good self-management, having good social awareness, and having good social management as well. I'm not just a contractor, I'm deep into this whole positive psychology stuff as well. Hence why my other videos, you'll see me talk about this stuff. But this is important because it positions you as a grand communicator, because 80% of what you're going to be doing is going to be managing, dealing with, working with, collaborating, leading people, okay? The next thing is conflict management. So knowing what that structure looks like, allowing people to feel heard, and really breaking down what they're able to commit to or agree to, and thinking of workable solutions that will move them towards X goal, okay, for organizational and personal goals. The other thing is knowledge on frameworks, okay? I think this is a big one. And what I mean by this is having the ability to understand an area or field like program management or project management or whatever it may be, and giving those nuggets away in such a way where you can start to structure things, okay? Because there are some organizations you'll walk into where they won't necessarily be able to know how to structure what they're doing. The thing following on from that is improvement implementation. So what this really means is looking at things, maybe you're doing some sort of process analysis of some form, okay? And you're finding ways to develop ways of it improving how things are implemented or done, okay? Because an improvement is always going to have some sort of like financial benefit in some way, shape or form, whether that is measured or not. The final thing is support and pastoral care. And really this is having, either formal conversations or informal conversations where the person can relate to you and really express what's on their mind and their heart. And when you have those people, whether they become friends or not, again, you're providing value. Why is that person going to speak badly of you? So these are the ways I've done it, using the right level of self-monitoring in order for me to be, again, effective. So when coming back to this stuff, the mitigations to remember is number one, know your worth. Don't undervalue yourself, okay? Like, understand you are a valuable person. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. They'll have their opinions, and their opinions may be warped, but it's their opinions. What anyone says about you is none of your business, as Les Brown would say. So think about that. The second thing is, let your value speak for itself. If you can provide value based on those 5 things and more, I think you'll be fine. Remember, it's the minority, it's not the majority. The third thing is, do not create unnecessary conflict. Okay. Don't create it because, if you're in a situation where people are coming at you and all that kind of stuff there, you need to be like water. Go with the flow. Okay. I'm not saying take nonsense, because you shouldn't take nonsense, but go with the flow. Let's talk leadership. Let's talk it. Okay. This is a big one because leadership defines a lot of stuff. Okay. Whether we like it or not. Just because you are in a position of power doesn't make you a leader. And I know this sounds crazy, but leadership is a luxury. It shouldn't be. And there will be people who argue this point, but it is. And I say that because not everybody employs good leadership skills. Really, it stems from that EQ model that I spoke about before. And so, unfortunately, organizations, and I'm not saying this from my past experiences, but I have experienced this, there are poor leaders. There are many organizations that are littered with poor leaders. And so you need to think to yourself, what can I do in order to make sure that I'm protected from this? And this is down to various different sort of reasons. Number one, nepotism. They bring in their friends or people they know because, whether we like it or not, organizations like to bring in people that sound like them, act like them, look like them, behave like them, all of these different things. Okay. And I think there was a study done back in early 2000s that showed that more than 60 to 70% of people successfully got new jobs based on knowing someone else or through somebody else. That's crazy. Okay. But this is why you should network. I don't really like that term, but maybe connect with people and find ways to just keep up to date with them, because whether you get an opportunity from that or not, there is a fruitfulness that comes out of that anyway. So see it less as networking, but connecting and developing a relationship. That's healthier. The other thing is lack of training. And obviously the type of training is really important. So for me, it can't just be rote learning. It can't just be sort of like looking at a whiteboard. It needs to be some sort of practice, whether this is sort of like a program of works or action learning sets as an example, or coaching and mentoring. This is all applied to that sort of stuff. It's lacking in many organizations because they don't have the money or the people trained in-house to do this stuff. There's also a lack of accountability. You'll see this. So there are many sort of like deputy directors, and directors of those directors, or even heads of department who don't have the right level of accountability held upon them. They're kind of left to their reins because their leaders are being leaders, apparently. And, they're left to their own devices. So they're not checked, is what I'm saying. And in some instances, they should be. There's also personal influences, okay? So there are some things that happen in those people's lives that make them act that way. So we can't always just say, oh, it's them, blah, blah, blah. But as a leader, the reality is people are looking to you. It's a heavy responsibility. So I do have empathy. I don't want to act like they're the big bad wolf. I just want to give you an idea of why there is a bit of a dark side sometimes when it comes to contracting, when the leadership is poor. And we all know that affects the culture as well. And so moving on, we understand that, whether we agree with this or not, your leaders that you're working for affect the culture, and there is a ripple effect. There is a ripple effect. And we have to find ways to manage those ripples, okay? Now, some leaders like to create a clique culture or clique effect, as I call it, which can leave you isolated at times. But as a contractor, it's best to not take this personally. You can't, because your contracting or contractual powers are different. They're not the same. And so you don't need to get involved in any politics. You just need to focus on making sure that you get the job done. That's why you're there. You're there to get the job done, okay? If you make friends with people, if you get all these other benefits, then yeah, that's great. But you're there to get the job done as per contract. So check your contract just to make sure, okay? Now, for me personally, I'm predominantly a value-based individual, okay? A lot of my decisions are driven by my values, and values are the things that determine your, decisions, because they're important to you. And those decisions determine your destination, and your destination, your destiny. I know, it's cheesy, but I had to say it, okay? I've been saying it so much on Instagram Live, before that I just thought, let me say it here. But what I'm saying to you is that you have to be professional in situations where your spirit is irked. You can tell that there's venom from when I'm even saying this, There have been situations where you're tested. You have to remain professional. And remember, as a contractor, independent consultant, you have the option of parting ways. No harm done. I mean, when I've been in a situation where I parted ways, they asked me if I wanted to think about it, and I said I have. What's there to think about? There's you know yourself. And so you have to make decisions, okay? Don't just do things because of money. Don't. It's important. And look, I have to be empathetic here. In some situations, you may feel like you can't do anything, but no, possibly you can. This is why I did that video on the seasons, because again, seasonally and based on your market and whether you're going for a generalist role, specialist role, again, watch my video. Then you'll get an idea of, again, can I do this? Can I specifically do this? You know, does it make sense? But your values will drive you. One thing that I didn't add in terms of the whole dark side of things is this whole sort of like recruitment or recruiter side of things. Sometimes there can be mixes up of communication and relationship development there as well. So keep people nice, but if they're playing you about, then it's not like kick them to the curb. Just act accordingly, but you know what the deal is. That's how I'd sort of like portray that. And so mitigations to remember is use self-monitoring techniques and skills. Self-monitoring is your ability to recognize how you feel in response to social situations and acting in accordance to that is deemed as socially acceptable. That's what it is. So it's not just being this raw, authentic self all the time. It's still being authentic, but in a way that allows you to communicate effectively with different people. The second thing is to focus on delivering value, okay? That's the most important thing. Deliver value. Based on those 5 things that I spoke about before. So the emotional intelligence, whether it's the improvement implementation or whether it's utilizing frameworks and methodologies, those are 3 of those 5. Don't take things personally. It's easier said than done, but you have to be able to park your emotions in some way. You have to be able to do that because that's how you survive in this game. This is not for the lighthearted or faint-hearted. This is for people who are willing to be resilient. Not every contract is like this, by the way. I'm not trying to paint this picture. What I am trying to say to you though is just have the resilience to keep on going, okay? And finally, don't take nonsense from anyone. Don't. You are a human being. You are a person of value and worth. And it would be a shame for someone to just abuse and use you a certain way because they think they can because they're paying you. Are you crazy? It doesn't work like that. So respect each other. I think it was Leo Tolstoy who once said, he was a person of value back then. I don't even know his title, but some wise guy. He basically said that respect should be in an empty place where love should be. Have that in mind. So moving on, we got system failures, okay? So system failures come into play when there are poor, again, processes, policies, leadership structures set up, all of this kind of stuff there, okay? So there are many instances where this is set up. Maybe they don't have a business management unit, or maybe they don't have a PMO or program manager, whatever it may be. These things can be frustrating, but you have to find ways to navigate through them. And so it affects how quickly things are done. It affects the quality of how things are done. But it's not impossible to overcome stuff. But there is something you need to remember when stuff like this happens. You need to remember this model. And I've taken out the other labels because I wanted you to focus on the white bit. You need to remember the zone of control. Okay, this is known as the locus of control model. You need to remember the zone of control. What this really means is, rather than being reactive, and sometimes you can't help that in organizations, do your best to find time, apportion time. Don't go to every meeting if you don't have to be proactive. This is planning. This is developing strategy. This is having an action log. This is setting up a cadence, a rhythm of meetings. This is investigating with other people. There are things you can influence as well, which is the darker blue in the middle, and that's usually people. And you do that through meeting with different people, okay? So this is going to be, again, maybe fixing a system yourself in some way, shape or form if it's within your remit. Or it is finding other people you can meet with to basically, again, understand the barriers and challenges to help tackle this stuff. It's investigative by nature. And if you're in the project space, you'd use something like the Deming cycle, the beginning part of that. So just understanding the problem and doing the analysis and all that kind of stuff there to overcome some of these issues. So mitigations to remember are focus on what you can control and also what you can influence, okay? Control is a nominal sort of term. Maybe control isn't the best word, but what can you directly change or manage? The next thing is manage what you can influence. I spoke about that before. This is really interactions with people. Speak to people for solutions or try to at least understand the barriers, okay? Become a solution finder. This is something that my old head of department used to call me, a solution finder. I didn't know I was, but apparently I am. And finally, find the right course of action through coordination. Okay, this is the value and expertise that you're bringing as a contractor because, again, you're coming in with a certain sort of like set of experiences that possibly people in the BAU organization, so business as usual, do not necessarily have. Now, this one is an interesting one. Your interview is yesterday. I mean, grammatically, that doesn't make sense, but the reality is it's true. What do I mean by this? So when I received my first, I think it was contracting interview, they told me that, I think the interview would be the next day or something like that. And I thought, what? It's either the next day or next 48 hours. And I felt very sort of like intimidated by that whole notion. And I soon came to realize this is a normal occurrence. This is normal for contracting. Sometimes they'll ask you if you're available on the day, okay, especially if it's in the morning. So maybe strategically you don't answer stuff in the morning, whatever. And sometimes, I'm not encouraging that, by the way, that was just me talking. And number two, sometimes they'll say, okay, we'll give you a week to prepare or whatever it may be. Now, it varies. There's no real rule to this. It just depends on the recruiter and the end client in terms of what they want. The end client is the organization you're working for. Of course, as you know, if you're inside of IR35, you're contractually working for the umbrella company, but you're not actually doing works for them. They're just processing your money and allowing you to deal with your tax. Anyway, if you want to learn about that, you can check the Inside of IR35 video that I developed. Now, you have to be sort of like in this space of understanding that actually this is not a bad thing, because you will learn to sink or swim. You will learn to really know your stuff. You will learn to be able to talk confidently. And practicing, yes, I would always encourage that, because if you're public speaking or doing a presentation or whatever, it's good. But the reality is, good public speakers are good because they are confident in what they're talking about. They're not just making it up. So if you are practicing, you have to find ways to develop your CV and your answers in a way that aligns to you as a person. That's the best way to deal with it. So it doesn't matter when anything comes up. Typically I normally take a minimum of 48 to 72 hours, preferably a week, but it just depends on how I'm feeling, okay? But again, this really edifies the whole point of knowing your generalist and your specialist area. Again, I spoke about this previously. Your specialist area is your specific niche. So maybe you are a public health commissioner that focuses on digital child health. Okay, this is something that I was before. Or a generalist could be I'm a public sector project manager or program manager, whatever it may be. So it's finding ways to articulate your experiences in a way that is suited to the specific role. Okay, so remember that in mind. Now we've got this sort of like slide here, which really reveals sort of like different types of vocational qualifications that have frameworks and methodologies applied to them. I think this is a good thing to have. I think if you have the opportunity, go out there and try to get a framework or methodology that you can utilize and make yourself shine even more okay? Even more so, should we say. So here are some examples. There are program management ones, change management ones, project management ones. So things like MSP and Prince2 and all of these different things. Now, if you can't afford this stuff or your organization can't pay for this, if you're in a permanent role currently right now, then I would try to understand the frameworks and find opportunities to try to, again, implement this stuff in your current work so that you can have solid examples that you can bring back. That's one way of maneuvering around it. So for me personally, I have obviously coaching and mentoring. For those of you who know, I'm a coach. I'm a practitioner in EMCC, so European Mentoring Coaching Council. I have MSP, which is managing successful programs as a practitioner, and I'm also a practitioner in change management as well. I don't have Prince2, I don't have Agile or Lean or any of that stuff, but I am aware of those principles. So this just adds to my sort of like my acumen or my capabilities or my skills or whatever you want to call it. So bear this in mind. So things to remember are, number one, don't be afraid of interviews. It will make you stronger. Okay. Number two, it's best to practice them when they come through. Okay. Now, if you're scared of doing it, understandable, but at least try. Just try if you can. In the contracting space, at least anyway, because you just never know, especially if you need the role. Number three, stay in your lane. Don't try to big yourself up unnecessarily or push yourself down or say something that's completely different. I mean, there are some people who have done that and they've got away with it and it's worked. And there is sort of like an area that you can stretch into, which I would encourage, but it's about articulation. It's about knowing how to speak and say different things. I would develop a bank of practice questions. My missus has done that. She's done a fantastic job of doing that, working alongside other colleagues, and it's been very beneficial to her. Also use the STAR method, STAR plus L. So the L I got from a HR OD person back in my previous permanent role. So that is situation, task, action, result, and lessons learned. What did you learn from that experience? And finally, utilize your frameworks, or utilize your experiences aligned to a framework. I think that's really useful when it comes to this stuff. Now we have the money part. Give me my money. Okay, I'm not playing. Give me my money. And I'm saying this because contracting is not a charity. We clearly know this, okay? Contracting is not a permanent role. We know this. We as professionals have a different set of standards and expectations when it comes to payment. And that is highlighted and delineated in our contractual terms. So you have to be familiar with your contract. Don't just kind of like have a contract, just have a contract. Now, there is this slide here, which I really like, if you say so myself. Okay. So for those of you who are outside of IR35, I'm going to explain to you how this works. Now, the contract terms can be based on milestones that you've achieved, or could be based on regular payments. Okay. But this is where you're working for your limited company or subcontracted under another limited company. Now, the general process is before you start a contract, there's going to be some sort of commercial arrangement that is made, okay? So this has come directly from a recruiter who's been procured out to sort of like find you, or via procurement that you've actually applied for yourself. So a requisition is raised, okay? So this is just basically saying we want this money for X, and it's authorized commercially in that end client organization. Now, this is where the process begins. Now, this is all to basically say that number one, we need a contractor to do X amount of work, you know, for X amount of weeks or whatever it may be. The next step is once you've won that mini competition, then you need to agree or negotiate your contractual terms. And this is where you just read through the contract and you're happy with everything and all that kind of stuff there. Now, this can be done through an agent. This will be done through you and the agent, definitely, or with you and the end client organization. It just depends how you found the contract. Once you're happy, you will sign the contract and work will begin as per contractual terms, okay? And usually this is where you have flex to work based on milestones or whatever it may be. If you have reached a milestone, or if you're due to get paid and the commissioner is happy, then an invoice should be issued. So you can't forget to issue your invoices. This is where you give the end organization the amount that you are looking to, again, receive based on the works that you've done. This invoice is usually uploaded onto a payment system for the finance to authorize, and you should get paid. And once you've been paid, you should receive a receipt acting as proof, okay? Now, the latter doesn't always happen, okay? Sometimes we're in situations where, because these organizations don't have a smooth way of paying these types of people, then you don't get paid on time, or sometimes the commissioner or the hiring manager or the line manager, however you want to see it, doesn't pay you on time. It can be very frustrating. So you need to have clear communications with individuals to ensure that you get paid on time. This is not a charity, so they have to remember that. And I sympathize with them in a way because I've seen what happens back end, you know, in my workforce and resourcing lead role. I've understood that sort of process. I definitely sympathize. Things happen. But on the flip side, these are people's lives. So whether they're permies or contractors or not, okay, everyone's got to eat. Now, if you're working inside of IR35, it's a bit different. And there is a relationship between the end client organization, depicted as HR here, the agency in the middle, and the umbrella company as well, okay? Now, here's this lovely sort of like presentation I've put together, but I'll just talk to it and you can follow it based on the different numbers. So assuming you already signed up to an umbrella company, they will work with the recruitment agency. The next step is once you have accepted the contract, okay, the umbrella company and the agency will have their own contract between themselves, okay, because the agency is representing the umbrella company and you as a contractor. The agency gains commission for this, so being the liaison. And number 4, they also collect payment from the end client and pass it on to the umbrella so that they can pay you, so that the umbrella can pay you. This means they can get their cut of the pie too. So they may make an extra 50, 100 or 150 pounds off your monies, okay? So if you're, let's say, for example, you're looking to get 500 a day, it's not 500 a day. There's money added on top of that, which they collect. It's actually something else. After that, it's important to understand that this is only made possible when, again, the timesheet that you sign, and again is approved by the line manager, which is number 6, is authorized and done on time, okay? So this timesheet authorizer is usually your hiring manager or the head of department or director who wants to see all of the contingent labor do what they're doing. And once the process is done, you'll get some notification that it's done and you'll get paid. Now there is a time window to do this. And again, sometimes the hiring manager doesn't always do this in time. The person who's authorizing your timesheet doesn't always do this in time. It can be very frustrating. So the best thing to do is to make sure that you put some calendar reminder in their diary and or you email them. Don't be afraid to do it. Some people are scared to do this, but this is your money. This is how you get paid. So I do this all the time. I put a calendar reminder in their diaries so they remember. And usually they're pretty good, but I've had some that haven't been good. And I've had to sit down with them to do it. So it is what it is. So things to remember is, number 1, read and agree your contract. Number 2, set up your invoicing system so that you can send them invoices on time. This is if you're outside. Number 3, be clear on how you get paid. The next thing is remind people to do their part. Don't be afraid to do it. You want to also make sure you evidence your work. This could be through highlight reports or emails or some sort of like reporting. Sometimes it's done for an invoice to, again, portray that you've done what you needed to do. The next thing is to work when you're paid. Sometimes you're going to have to call it quits and say, I'm not doing anything until I get paid. Now, I'm going to leave that for you to decide that. I'm not encouraging this, but I'm not saying no to this. You know the culture, you know your values, you can make your own decisions. Number 7 is to remember that payment regularity varies. And the last thing is to make sure that you are your own financial manager, because sometimes you may not get paid on time, and so you need to tap into your emergency fund and all this kind of stuff there. Don't be one of those people who just splashes because now they're getting paid, £400 a day, £500 a day, £800 a day, and they think they're the man or the woman. You're gonna be really frustrated, my friend. So really, to wrap up, it's to highlight these different things. So the first thing is, number 1, long breaks aren't always bad, okay? Look at the season and understand the opportunities. It can be an opportunity, again, to have that mental break. The next thing is, it doesn't have to be permanent versus contractor, but let your value speak for itself. Thirdly, leadership is a luxury, like I stated before, and the reality is you're not always going to get the best leadership. So see where you can lead and make the situation easier. Number 4, systems do fail, and if they do, be a solution finder. The next thing is, your interview is yesterday, but it makes you resilient. So do what you can to, again, practice, review, iterate your stuff so that you stand out. And finally, you're not a charity. Don't be afraid to remind people about what they need to do. Now, as I stated before, if you really want to make this a career for yourself, the new portfolio career, the way that we move forward in this world, then I would urge you to check out the link below for the independent consultant. So this is a comprehensive guide of how you can become a contractor within the UK. It talks deeply about the experiences that I've went through and the steps that you need to take, as well as definitions in terms of how you can prosper within this space. So if this is something that you're interested in, then again, make sure you check it out for yourself below. The link will be below for you to check out. Now, if you want to see more videos really tailored around positive psychology, portfolio careers, and also life management, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.